Oh man, Goosebumps. Isn't that creepy intro music just beautiful and nostalgic? And that creepy ass guy with the black coat just terrified me when I was a kid. Keep in mind they never show his face, so my young imagination would just run wild with this. He's just walking towards this city with papers flying out of his suitcase like he's about to cause hella mayhem. Now I know Goosebumps is a kid's show. It originated from children's books first, of course, because whenever my school would have a book fair, Goosebumps books were the first thing I went for. Good times. But I say that to say, some of these episodes get extremely creepy and disturbing. What I find the most interesting about kid-based horror is that the writers are faced with the challenge of making the episodes scary but not too scary. There's definitely an invisible line you can't cross when it comes to kid horror, and R.L. Stine does a fantastic job of pushing that boundary. Oh boy, today we will be discussing season 3, episode 5, Click. This episode is definitely disturbing, and it even has a crazy twist ending that you don't want to miss. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you would like, and without further ado, let's get into this video. Now this episode kicks off with Seth just getting home, and he was super excited about a package he was expecting in the mail. This is when his little sister comes out, and immediately you get the vibe that she's that annoying little sister. She tells Seth that he's in trouble because their mom had told him previously to stop ordering junk out of that magazine that he reads. He tells her that it's his money and that he can do whatever he pleases with it, and she says,
"That's not what Mom says."
Seth then says he's tired of taking orders and would just like to do things his own way for once. Now Seth had ordered some type of cool universal remote, and on the box it had even said possesses ultimate control. Seth takes the remote out of the box and somehow it immediately syncs up with everything in his house, which is super weird, especially considering where technology was at this point. It wasn't the best, but somehow this remote was different. Now Seth turns the radio off and proceeds to watch TV when he is interrupted by this weird guy that had a message to give him about his new remote. Apparently this guy was the president of the company. That's cool and all, but it's weird as hell that he can just interrupt this man's TV whenever. Really think about this. He had to have known Seth was watching TV to know to interrupt what he was watching. This makes me think that the president tracks whoever buys his remote. So the guy tells Seth to follow all the instructions of the remote carefully, and Seth even tries to change the TV, but he can't. So his program goes back to normal, and he didn't really think too much about it. Now this is when things get really strange. His little sister comes in and starts practicing her tap dancing right by the TV, obviously to be annoying on purpose. So Seth turns the TV up louder, but his sister is still just too annoying.
How am I supposed to watch TV if you're tapping your brains out?
How am I supposed to practice with the TV so loud?
So out of reflex, Seth aims the TV remote at her and presses the pause button. Now he did this obviously not expecting anything to happen, but she actually pauses in real time. Now Seth sees this and can't really believe what he's seeing. He calls out his sister's name, which was Jamie, but he gets no response.
Jimmy? Jimmy?
This is when that weird guy pops back up on the TV with a general message saying to keep the remote away from children because it wasn't a toy. Now that wasn't the creepy part. It's what he says and does next that creeped me the fuck out. He leans forward and says,
"It's not a toy."
I swear at that time, I genuinely feel like he was actually looking at Seth. I'm talking about just staring into that man's soul. Seth just stares in disbelief and can't believe the power he now possesses. Now Seth starts walking back slowly because he's trying to process what's actually happening. He sits down and hits the play button. This is when his sister resumes dancing like nothing had happened. Now this is typically the case when I see things like this happen. Usually the person getting frustrated frozen in time is unaware of it. Also, when they come out of being frozen, they usually have no memory of what just happened. We are then taken to Seth just chilling in his room playing with the remote when we see that he can actually switch the color of his fish in real time.
Tint. Maybe a little less.
That's pretty damn cool. Now Seth goes outside and literally turns down the volume of the lawnmower. Not gonna lie, I see absolutely nothing wrong with that. He puts it back to normal, and this is when the paperboy rides through and Seth literally starts rewinding and fast forwarding the paperboy. This is the first real moment we see of Seth abusing his power with the remote, and that creepy guy from earlier clearly said the remote wasn't a toy, so I honestly can't see this ending too well. Now as Seth is hitting the eject button to make the newspaper raise so he wouldn't have to pick it up, the house phone starts to ring and Seth's mom asks him can he get it because she was busy. This is when Seth answers the phone, and it was that same guy from earlier giving Seth another warning, telling him the remote should only be used for proper situations.
The XG20 universal remote control can be used in a variety of situations. But remember, like any good thing, it should be used properly and only in moderation.
Now I'm telling you guys, he has to have some type of eyes on Seth, because every time he seems to abuse the remote, he gets a message from this same guy. Now Seth is weirded out by this, but he just hangs up and tries to brush it off. Now it's the next day at school, and Seth was telling his friend about the remote when he calls him crazy because Seth basically told him he could control the world with that remote. Now he sees this kid who is apparently a bully and had picked on him all last school year. Seth then uses the bully as an example to prove a point to his friend and basically walks up to him and starts a altercation. He wasn't really too messed up about the kid that was currently getting bullied. Nah, my guy Seth was just ready to prove a point. Seth points the remote at the bully and changes the channel. Now when Seth changes the channel, whoever he is pointing the remote at becomes whatever program that would normally be on that channel. As we can see, he changes him into a game show host, a news anchor, a bunny, and then decides to change him back to normal. After he did this, the boy seemed sick all of a sudden and had to sit down. Then the kid he was bullying sees this and was like, nah bruh, I don't know what type of witchcraft shit y'all got going on here, but I'm about to bounce. Now some time had passed, and it was later on that night when we see Seth awakened by a voicemail from the same weird guy from earlier. As he begins to explain the do's and don'ts of the remote, Seth turns off the message before he could continue. We then see Seth receive an email on his computer, and when he goes to look at it, the message says, do use the XG20 remote control to its full potential. Do use it for good. Don't misuse its powers. Don't let it control you. Now it's the next day at school when the teacher walks in and says he's giving the class a pop quiz. This is when Seth's friend Kevin says he didn't study. Seth was like, so? Neither did I. This is when this man pauses everyone but him and Kevin and walks up to the teacher's desk to steal the answers to the test. Kevin calls Seth out on this, telling him how wrong it was, but Seth really didn't give a fuck. I mean, if I'm Kevin in this situation, I'm honestly not caring either, but Seth is still abusing the remote. So it's later that night when Seth wakes up because it sounds like there's a vehicle outside. And he was definitely right, because there was some random guy walking away from his house. He runs downstairs to find an envelope, and inside this envelope was a message that stated,
Caution. Continual misuse of the Verona XG20 universal remote control will void the warranty, and the consequences can be severe.
Now again, they are trying to warn Seth that the remote can be very dangerous when misused, but again, he completely blows this off. Next, we see Seth sitting in the front room trying to watch television when we see his little sister comes in and starts practicing her moves in front of the TV again. Like bruh, at this point, just go watch TV in your room. This is when his little sister grabs the remote, because for some odd reason, Seth just casually had the remote sitting on the table. Like, bruh, you know the power that remote possesses, but yet you're still treating it like it's just any remote. They fight over the remote and it ends up dropping. This is when his little sister snitches to his mom that he's hogging the remote again, and she storms in along with his dad to demand he give his sister the remote. Like, yeah, just don't acknowledge the fact that he was there first. You just automatically give her control over the TV. So what does Seth do? He hits the pause button and freezes his family. Now, upon doing this, Seth didn't realize that he had just made one of the biggest mistakes of his life. Now, Seth walks up to his family and says,
"Look guys, I'm sorry, but sometimes you just drive me nuts. Now I hope during this brief timeout, you'll chill a little bit."
This is when he sits back down and tries to unpause his family, but the remote doesn't seem to be working. He tries over and over and over again when he shakes the remote and notices there's something rambling in the inside. So the remote must have been broken earlier when Seth and his sister were fighting over the remote. He panics and goes to get his friend Kevin when they both walk in, and Kevin had said he knew something would happen if Seth kept playing around with the remote. So Kevin suggests that they take the remote to a repair shop, but then Seth says they can't because this wasn't just some ordinary remote. I mean, the guy fixing the remote can't be any worse than you, Seth. So yeah. Just look at what you have done so far with it in your possession. But anyways, Kevin then says, well, how about we call the place you ordered it from? The guys rush upstairs, find the number and call it, but no one answers. This is when he suddenly gets a call back, but it was just some automatic voice message giving them the address of the business.
Well, this is it.
Now they actually show up to this address, but it just looks hella sus. It just looks like they were walking into a trap of some sort. Kevin is sketched out and says this can't be the place. It's too run down. This is when Seth knocks on the door but gets no response. Thank God, because there's no telling what was going to come out of that door. So they head back to Seth's place, and by this time it had gotten kinda late. Seth couldn't really take it anymore, and this is when he decides that he will attempt to fix the remote on his own. Kevin had advised him not to do this, stating that he could make things worse, but Seth implies that things can't possibly get any worse than what they already are. As he takes the back off the remote, he gets a call from, you guessed it, the creepy old guy from earlier.
Tony?
Never attempt to service the Verona XG20 universal remote control. Opening the back of the device is dangerous.
He tells Seth to consult a authorized dealer, but he had already tried to do that, and before Seth could tell him, he hangs up. So even after this warning, Seth goes right back to trying to fix the remote because, to be honest, he really had no other choice. He finds a piece inside of the remote that looks like it came loose earlier, and this happens.
Looks like it fits in here.
What was that?
Now after this, they go try the remote one more time, but it still doesn't work. Kevin then tells him to try shaking the remote because that's usually what he does at home. This was literally his last hope of unpausing his family. He tries the remote again. It actually works this time. I was holding my breath for that man when I first saw it. Seth couldn't be more happy to see his family and hugs his mom and even apologizes to his annoying little sister. Now after all of this crazy stuff happened, Kevin tells Seth that they need to get rid of the remote ASAP, but for some reason he still didn't want to get rid of it, claiming that he had fixed it. So he finally agrees to get rid of the remote, and they decide to put it in the bottom of the trash can. Kevin then says he has to get home because it was obviously late and starts heading that way. This is when Seth does the unthinkable. He waits until Kevin gets not even around the block, but literally down the street when he turns around to get the remote. Yeah, see, it's Seth's greed that's going to end up sealing his fate in the end, and you will see just that. Now it's the next day at school when Seth is heading to his locker when he was putting some notebooks away. This is when the remote falls out of his locker, and Kevin was standing right down the hall when Seth caught it. Kevin says, I thought we got rid of that last night. When he says, We did. Kev then says, well, what are you doing with it? This is when this man says the remote kept appearing back in his room every time he tried to throw it away. But we saw last night that was clearly a lie. Kevin knows off rip that he's lying, and when he tries to press Seth about it, Seth just goes, so what if I am? They then get into a heated argument in the hallway. Kevin was urging Seth to get rid of the remote because he could see it was changing him. Remember earlier Seth had stated that he was tired of taking orders, so this remote gives him the ability to do literally anything he wants. Now Seth is going crazy at this point. He tells Kevin that he's just mad he didn't get to the trash can first last night, when in reality all this man had to do is order a goddamn remote for himself if that's what he really wanted. Now after this, they have this cringe ass tussle over the remote, and Seth slings Kevin back and uses the remote to his advantage. Yeah, they're just doing all of this in the hallway and everybody is just pretty much ignoring them. Yeah, like kids ignore fights in schools. Yeah, right. This also leads me to, where are the goddamn teachers? I swear when I was in middle school, it was always teachers in the goddamn hallway. But anyways, Seth starts walking down the hallway and this random phone just appears when he walks by, like, what the fuck? And of course he answers the phone instead of just walking past it like a normal human being would do. And this is when we see the creator of the universal remote give Seth one last chance.
You've misused your gift even after repeated warnings. This is your last chance.
This is when shit gets real. Kevin comes up behind him trying to take the remote again, and Seth pushes him off and tries to use the remote, but this time it doesn't work. Kevin slowly starts walking up when Seth is still trying to misuse the remote. This is when Seth shakes the remote and the unthinkable happens.
Seth, don't do it!
He is then transferred into some dark virtual reality and tries to use the remote to get himself out. This is when we see that the batteries in the remote were low, and I'm guessing the remote is too powerful to use on low. So now his fate. The president of the remote emerges from the darkness and says,
we hope you enjoy your new Verona XG20 Universal Remote Control. If treated with proper care, it will bring you a lifetime of enjoyment.
He then disappears back into the darkness, leaving Seth all alone. Man, if this isn't creepy, Seth is now stuck there forever with no escape and will most likely starve to death and die. Talk about a twist ending, but Seth was given so many chances and in the end, he chose his own fate. So let me know what you guys think about this crazy episode of Goosebumps in the comments down below. And if you want to see more Goosebumps videos, be sure to leave a like, and until next time, peace.